Hello, it's Friday, January 27th, 2017, and as of this recording, I'm still depressed, but I'm not dead. Hey, here I am. I'm back. Gonna try something a little different on the show today. So if you've been to my Ever Struggling blog, you've seen that there's not a whole lot going on. I did put up a traditional looking blog post the other day. The following day, a day after, Nora had said that she wanted to put up a post. And, we had to get back through to figure out how she gets in and all that. But she typed up a pretty open and honest blog post that was received pretty well by lots of our friends on Facebook. Even got a comment on the blog post, which is woohoo, awesome. And so, obviously I read it. She asked me to read it before she posted it. Not so much to edit for content, but more to edit for typos, things like that. So I did. I read it, and then I read it again once it was posted. Part of me curious to make sure it formatted right, it looked good. So I read it, and kind of in line with what I've been saying on the podcast here, didn't really feel a lot as I was reading it. And yeah, it's bothersome to me. In the past I've kind of said, oh, okay, this is where I am. But this is Nora. This is my wife. She's, the most important person in the world to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the blog post to you guys. So anybody who's been to the blog and has read it, I apologize. Listen in if you like, but that's pretty much what's going to go on. And I guess there's two parts, two reasons why I want to do this. One is to put it out there for anybody who doesn't go to the blog, who doesn't, who's not, into web pages, things like that. You listen to the podcast and that's enough for you. And secondly, I want to read it out loud for myself and see if that helps to, ring true. I don't know if that's what I want to say. I just see if that impacts me differently than having just read it. And what made me think of this was back when, after the wedding, back in August, I remember, it was a rough ride home and I tried to record a little bit for the podcast here as I was driving on my own, even just sitting in a rest stop, sitting on the side of the road. And it was very difficult for me to kind of verbally, orally speak out the words that were going through my head. And I don't really get that. I think if I was typing those words, it would have been just fine. So, I want to see what happens if I read through this, see how it feels doing so. So yeah, that's the story. If you haven't read it, you'll hear it. If you have read it, you hear it again. Whatever. So yeah, let me just, housekeeping real quick, jamoalki all over the internet, facebook.com/jamoalki, jamoalki@gmail.com, Twitter @jamoalki, www.jamoalki.info, and that kind of text phone line 248-648-1419. And again, that's Jamoalki, Jamoalki. So, yeah, I'm going to get cozy and we'll get going here. Okay, so here we are. This is a blog post typed up by Nora on jamoalki.info. The date of the blog post is January 22nd, 2017. And it's titled The Worst Days of My Life. January 21st, 2015 was, as far as I can remember, the single worst day of my life so far. This week has been a rough one for me on many levels. But the memories of that day and the weight of feeling my husband grapple with that anniversary have unquestionably deepened my own struggle. So in the spirit of sharing and catharsis, I think it is time for me to tell my story of that day. About 9 months prior, I'd gotten a Facebook message that led to many conversations, then an in-person meeting, and then the realization that I had fallen deeply in love. We lived 2 states apart, so we had to work hard to plan our time together, and my love was scheduled to fly to Minnesota to visit me that day. My company holiday party was that coming weekend, and I was looking forward to introducing this amazing man to some colleagues and friends. The day dawned like any other. We wished each other a good morning and asked how the other had slept via text. I got myself ready and headed to work, but as the morning went on, he was overly quiet. Normally, I would expect to get all sorts of little messages with updates. He was heading to Detroit. He was at the airport. Whatever. Instead, he was quiet. And even stranger, when I messaged him, I got no response. I knew he had been telling me that he was having a really hard time. I knew that he had taken a leave of absence from work. But it hadn't dawned on me until it was actually happening just how desperate he was. At first, I thought I might be overreacting. But as the time for his flight grew nearer, my concern grew stronger. I messaged his ex-wife to ask if she had heard anything. She hadn't. She checked with his mom. His mom said that she'd gotten a message from him saying that he'd decided to drive to Minnesota instead of fly, so he no longer needed a ride to the airport. The pit in my stomach grew. He was a logical guy, and there was no logic in him deciding to drive when we already had a plane ticket. Something was horribly wrong. I knew he was lying, and I feared that this meant he decided to take his own life, that he was trying to do so that very moment. The next day or two were just a blur of pain and grief for me. He was missing. No one had heard from him. Not his parents, not his ex, not his girls, not his best friend, and not me. I left multiple voicemails begging him to come back to me, promising to help, and all the while fearing that I was already too late. I spent countless hours talking and messaging with his ex. We tried to track his phone. She contacted the police, and they interviewed both of us. Finally, we looked at his call history on his phone bill and found that one didn't fit. The call was from the morning he disappeared. I called the number and tried to explain what was going on, asked for any information at all. The girl I reached was horrified. She said she'd seen a post the day before on Craigslist from someone that had indicated he was planning to kill himself. She had responded and encouraged him not to. She had offered her number. He had apparently called that morning to thank her for caring. It was clear that my gut had been right. He was in crisis. He had reached out to strangers for help, but not to those closest to him, because maybe he didn't really want us to help, or maybe he didn't know how. For me, this discovery was just another reason to sob uncontrollably, to not eat, and to be afraid of being alone. I wasn't worried about hurting myself. I was just so fragile and scared. My kids stayed with my ex during that time. He was supportive, and I didn't feel like I could be a mom to them in those days. My sister came over and spent as much time with me as she could. She stayed over so that I wouldn't have to be alone. And then finally there was a message and a call. He'd been found. He was alive. He was in a hospital. Dave was headed there. That was about all we knew, but it was enough. My sobs of anguish and loss turned to tears of relief. At least I hadn't lost him. At least there was a chance. I immediately made arrangements and packed my car. I was going to Michigan. I had to see him. I had to touch him. My friends and family asked if I should wait until we knew more, or until he was out of the hospital, or until he was better. For many of them, I think they wondered if it was wise for me to continue in a relationship with a guy who had caused me that much pain and who clearly had significant issues. For me, there was no such question. Those 2 days of fear made it crystal clear to me just how much I wanted and needed him in my life. His issues are an illness. If he'd been diagnosed with cancer, I wouldn't be running away. I sure as hell wasn't going to run away because he had depression. The drive took most of the day. I got an update from Dave along the way. There had been an overdose. There was something about a possible seizure. He'd been found in a grocery store and an ambulance had been called. As the day progressed, he was moved to an inpatient mental health program from the hospital. If I recall correctly, visiting hours were from 7 to 8, so now I was racing against the clock. I arrived in the town and then at the address, but there were multiple buildings and it took me a few tries before I found the right one, the right entrance. There were 15 minutes or so left in the visiting time. I didn't know if they'd let me see him, but they did. They made an exception and gave us some time when they learned that I had driven all the way from Minnesota. I got to see him and hug him and verify with my own eyes that he was physically okay, that he was still alive. I knew then that this was the start of a long and difficult journey. I knew that he wouldn't magically get better. I knew that he would likely never be cured. And a journey it has absolutely been. I've had days of deep worry. I've learned afterwards of ongoing thoughts he's had of harming himself. I opened a hotel room once scared of what I might find when he had once again been unresponsive. I don't know that my fear and anxiety about going through that day again will ever fully dissipate, but he is still here with me, and I treasure that. I know him and love him even more today than I did then. So we continue to work together each day to try to help manage his depression and to help him feel better. And we celebrate each passing year as a victory against the darkness that haunts him. Nora. So again, guys, you can read that word for word on the blog at jamoalki.info. In my head, I had planned on going back and adding to the story once I'd read it to you guys. I don't know. Part of me was hoping to get some sort of emotional response, and we didn't really go that route. So I guess this will just go into a short little riff about stigma, self-stigma, misunderstanding, misreading. I was reading it, and a couple things. While I was reading it, rather than being emotionally invested into what I was reading, I actually found myself kind of proofreading as I was going. And I found a mistake that I hadn't caught when I had read it before, and saw some words that I hadn't remembered seeing before, and some different things. Like a jackass would do, right? That's how I feel right now. Logically, intellectually in my head, I understand this lack of emotion that I have virtually all day, every day. But then ironically, I guess, emotionally, I feel that I'm just a great big ass. It's a really heartfelt and provocative post that Nora has put out there. Really opening herself up and sharing, and it's clear there's a considerable amount of pain and anguish because of me, because of the actions of me 2 years ago. And I sit here and don't feel anything about that while I read that. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to take from that other than, yeah, hey guys, I'm a jackass. Sorry it's taken 33 episodes for you to figure it out. But maybe it's true. But then again, maybe it's not. I don't know. Does it count that I see kind of the emotions that Nora, the kind of roller coaster of emotions that I brought Nora along for? I bought her a whole pack of tickets for this roller coaster ride, so she can keep going over and over and over. So is it make it better that I acknowledge that, but don't feel it? It's a weird thing, right? I don't have feeling over reading what she was put through, but I have this feeling of going on about not feeling anything. I don't know. That's So reading it was a I don't know, I guess a failure. I'm not supposed to use that word so often. It was experiment. We'll see. As of right now at 2:46 in the afternoon, Central Time, I haven't gotten Nora's permission to put the story out on the podcast. This is going to be a pretty short show, mostly because I've got lots of things going on. I got a leaky faucet. I've got a school production show to go to. I've got a trip to Michigan coming up tomorrow morning. I'll be leaving to go see Mo do in her kind of cheer competition that she's in. Should be pretty exciting. Lots of driving. Hopefully I'll get to see Dave while I'm there. Maybe see a couple other friends if I can squeeze it in before I head back. Yeah, I don't know. If I think of something else, I'll cut back in and add some to this. But I guess I don't know what to make of what we've all traveled through here today. Please, guys, a really big favor. if you listen to the show, please send me some kind of feedback. Anything would be just great. Good, bad, other, just something so I know that, the downloads are getting into some people's ears. It's been pretty quiet for a while, and that's okay, but maybe that'll give me a little pump up and, get the old creative juices going to put out some more shows a little bit quicker, a little bit easier. I will say thanks to Mike for sending me an email. I'll email you back probably the next 3, 4, 5 weeks or so, and when I figure out what to say. So that's going to be it. Everybody, thank you so very much for listening. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. So everybody be safe and be well. Mm-hmm.